He is not a volunteer, the translator said, and High Curator Valus answered. Then stop calling him a man and list him as equipment. The chamber went quiet after that, not because anyone felt ashamed, but because shame was not something the Galactic Archive had ever practiced in public. Above them, Eden 9 filled the observation glass like a storm with a planet hidden inside it. Black clouds rolled over continents no one had mapped, blue lightning crawled sideways across the upper atmosphere, and the ocean shone with a dull metallic color that made most species look away after a few seconds. 43 expeditions had gone down there in 600 years. Some came back without their ships. Some came back without their memories. Most did not come back at all. That was why the galaxy called it the Forbidden Planet, and why every child from the core worlds learned the same bedtime warning. Do not follow strange lights, do not mock old laws, and do not land on Eden 9. Caleb Morgan stood alone at the center of the archive floor with his hands in the pockets of an old brown field jacket, looking less like a historic test subject and more like a tired contractor waiting for bad coffee at an airport gate. He was 38, pale-skinned, broad-shouldered in the plain way of a man who had carried toolboxes more often than weapons, with short sandy hair and a face that looked like it had learned early not to give much away. The aliens around him expected shaking hands. They expected begging. They expected the ordinary panic of a fragile Earth mammal finally understanding where the powerful had decided to place him. Caleb just looked up at the planet and swallowed once. Not fear exactly. Something older. Something almost private. Valus drifted down from his raised platform, his silver-violet skin catching the light like polished stone. Caleb Morgan of Earth, he said, smooth and loud enough for the live broadcast to carry across half the civilized spiral. You have been selected to settle a tiresome human myth. Your people claim unusual adaptability. Today, we will measure it. Caleb turned his head slightly. You mean you are dropping me on a planet your own people are scared of and calling it science? A few delegates shifted in their seats. Valus smiled with the patience of a teacher correcting a slow student. Science often requires discomfort. Caleb gave a small nod, as if filing that away. Funny how it usually requires somebody else's. The line landed harder than anyone expected. For 1 second, even the translation system seemed reluctant to repeat it. Then Valus gestured toward the medical drones. They moved in, clipping sensors to Caleb's wrists, throat, chest, and temples. Heart rate, stress chemistry, blood oxygen, neural response. Every number appeared in clean white text above him for the galaxy to watch. The screen showed that Caleb's heart was steady, not calm like a monk, not empty like a machine, steady like a man who had been afraid before and learned fear was not useful unless you put it to work. Your survival window, Valus said, is estimated at 9 minutes without full environmental armor. Caleb looked at the armored suit they had prepared for him, then at the small tray holding the few items they had allowed from his personal kit. A folding knife, a steel lighter, a coil of paracord, a battered compass, water tabs, a paper notebook sealed in plastic, and a photograph tucked under a rubber band. Valus followed his gaze and gave a soft laugh. Primitive comforts? Caleb picked up the compass and tapped it once against his palm. Reliable ones. The observation glass darkened as the descent craft moved into launch position. Eden 9 grew larger, swallowing the stars behind it. Across the chamber, alien officials leaned forward, eager for the lesson they thought was coming. They wanted humanity reduced to numbers. They wanted the famous Earth stubbornness turned into a chart, a warning label, a joke told over diplomatic wine. Caleb slipped the photograph into his inside pocket. It showed a small white farmhouse outside Baton Rouge after a summer storm, his mother on the porch, his father holding a dog that hated cameras, and 12-year-old Caleb squinting into the sun like the world was too bright and still worth looking at. The launch doors opened. Wind from the upper atmosphere hit the craft hard enough to rattle the floor beneath his boots. Valus raised his voice over the alarms. Any final statement for Earth? Caleb stared at Eden 9, at the black rain and the blue lightning and the cloud bands twisting like hurricane arms over warm Gulf water. His expression changed so slightly most of the galaxy missed it. But Mira, the young alien aide standing nearest to him, saw it. Recognition. Caleb breathed in through his nose, slow and careful, like he had caught a smell from childhood through an open screen door. Then he said, "That planet is not forbidden." Valus blinked. Caleb stepped onto the ramp before anyone could stop him. "It is familiar." The ramp did not lower all the way. It stopped 3 feet above the launch bay floor, shuddering as the descent craft locked into its magnetic rail. Caleb stepped across the gap without looking down, and that bothered Valus more than fear would have. Fear could be explained. Fear could be filed. Fear made primitive species easy to categorize. But this quiet, workmanlike patience from a human who had just been told he might not live long enough to finish a cup of coffee felt like an error in the room. Mira followed with a case of atmospheric scanners clutched against her narrow chest, her blue-silver hands tight around the handle. She was young for her species, barely old enough to serve in the archive field division, and still soft enough to look uncomfortable when someone was treated like cargo. Caleb noticed. He always noticed the person in the room trying not to be cruel. "First drop?" he asked. Mira glanced at Valus, then back at Caleb. "My first to Eden 9. Caleb nodded. "That is a yes." Valus entered behind them with 2 security officers and a camera drone floating near his shoulder. "Do not mistake casual conversation for authority, Assistant Mira. The human is not leading this expedition." Caleb set his small kit on the bench and tightened the laces on his old hiking boots. "Good. I charge extra for leadership." One of the security officers made a clicking sound that might have been amusement before Valus turned his cold eyes on him. The sound stopped. The craft sealed with a heavy thump, and the observation chamber disappeared behind reinforced glass. Inside, everything became smaller, louder, more honest. The polished language of the archive did not fit inside a shaking metal box pointed at a planet everyone feared. Caleb sat on the bench, checked the paracord, checked the lighter, checked the compass, then touched the photograph inside his jacket without taking it out. His thumb paused there for half a second, long enough for Mira to see. "Family?" she asked quietly. Caleb kept his eyes on his gear. "Used to be." The answer closed the door without slamming it. Mira looked away, embarrassed by her own question. Valus, however, leaned in as if he had found a weakness. Emotional attachment is a known human instability. It may distort your responses during the trial. Caleb looked up at him. "You ever lose anybody, Curator?" Valus straightened. "My personal history is irrelevant." That usually means yes. The craft jolted as the launch rail caught. Red lights washed over the cabin. A countdown began in 3 different languages, none of them English, until Caleb's wrist monitor translated it late and badly. He smiled a little at that. Not because it was funny, but because bad equipment doing its best had always seemed more trustworthy to him than perfect equipment pretending it could not fail. Valus watched his numbers on the display. Heart rate still steady, breathing controlled, stress rising, but not breaking. "You are frightened," Valus said, sounding pleased. Caleb buckled the chest strap on his harness. "Of course I am." The admission made the alien camera drone tilt closer. Caleb looked straight at it, tired eyes and all. Only idiots stop being scared. The trick is not letting it drive. The craft fired from the bay. Weight slammed into Caleb's chest, hard and familiar, like an old pickup hitting a washed-out road too fast. Mira gasped. One guard cursed in his native tongue. Valus gripped the rail with both hands as Eden 9 filled the forward screen, black clouds opening beneath them like a mouth. Caleb did not pray. He did not make a speech. He just pressed one palm against the bench, feeling the vibration through the metal, and listened. The engines were fighting crosswind. The hull was ticking from charged rain. The guidance system was already correcting too much. He had heard panic in machines before. "Your left stabilizer is overworking," Caleb said. The pilot snapped back. "The system says nominal." Caleb looked at the forward screen as blue lightning crawled under them. "Then your system is lying." 2 seconds later, the left side of the craft dropped 12 feet. The drop threw Mira against her harness and made the camera drone slam into the ceiling with a brittle spark. Valus shouted for the pilot to correct, but the pilot was already fighting the controls with all 4 hands, his voice tight as alarms stacked over one another. "Left stabilizer is losing response. Guidance is searching for horizon lock." Caleb leaned forward as far as the harness allowed and looked through the front glass. There was nothing but black cloud, blue light, and rain moving sideways so fast it looked like wires scraping across the ship. "Stop chasing the horizon," he said. The pilot snapped his head back. This craft is certified for hostile atmospheric entry. I am sure it looked great on the brochure. Stop chasing the horizon. Valus pointed at Caleb as if the gesture could put him back in his place. You will not interfere with trained personnel. Caleb ignored him and kept his eyes on the cloud wall. His voice stayed low, the way people speak around a skittish horse or a bad engine. Your system is reading the electrical bands as ground reflection. It thinks the planet is tilting. It is not. The storm is. The pilot hesitated. Another jolt hit them, dropping the craft hard enough that the overhead lights flickered from red to white and back again. Mira swallowed a frightened sound. Caleb glanced at her. Breathe through your nose. Count 4 in, 4 out. Do not fight the strap. She nodded quickly, trying to copy him. Valus saw that and hated it. The human was not supposed to be useful yet. The human was supposed to be a number on a screen, a fragile body inside a controlled demonstration. Instead, Caleb Morgan sat in a failing descent craft over the most feared planet in the archive and sounded like a man helping his neighbor back a trailer down a muddy driveway. Manual trim, Caleb said. 10 degrees right. Nose up too. Cut the autocorrection before it rolls us. The pilot looked at Valus. Valus looked at the forward glass, where the storm had become a moving wall. Pride lost to survival by half an inch. Do it, he said. The pilot switched to manual. The craft bucked once, then steadied. Not smooth, not safe, but honest. Caleb let out a slow breath. There you go. For the first time since launch, the pilot did not argue. Beneath the clouds, Eden 9 appeared in broken pieces. A dark forest taller than office towers. Rivers the color of old pennies. Ridgelines steaming under warm rain. And open plains cut by silver veins of mineral rock. The ship's scanners tried to name everything and failed. Unknown atmospheric compound. Unknown biological density. Unknown electromagnetic interference. Unknown, unknown, unknown. Caleb almost smiled. Earth had never cared much for tidy labels either. Then the engines coughed. The sound was small, but Caleb felt it in his boots. We are not making the landing pad, he said. There is no landing pad, Mira whispered. Exactly. The pilot brought them down in a clearing surrounded by black trees with bark like wet iron. The landing was ugly. The craft hit, bounced, slid through red mud, and stopped tilted against a ridge of roots as thick as pickup trucks. For several seconds, nobody moved. Rain hammered the hull. Steam hissed from the left engine. A high, lonely wind moved through the forest outside, like somebody dragging a bow across a cello string. Valus unbuckled first, trying to reclaim dignity by standing too quickly. He nearly fell. Caleb caught his sleeve without thinking. Valus stared at the human hand on his robe. Caleb let go. Careful. Gravity is heavier than your home world. I am aware, Valus said, though he clearly had not been. The rear hatch opened with a groan. Wet air rolled inside, thick and warm, carrying the smell of metal, soil, green things, and distant lightning. The alien security officers recoiled. Their suit filters screamed warnings. Caleb stepped to the opening and closed his eyes for 1 second. It was not Baton Rouge. It was not any place on Earth. But something in the air pulled at old memories anyway. Summer storms, flooded ditches, his father's boots on the porch, his mother yelling for everyone to get inside before the sky opened up. Mira watched him. Is it poison? Caleb opened his eyes. No, he picked up his kit, clipped the compass to his belt, and stepped down into the mud. It swallowed his boot almost to the ankle. He looked back at them, rain running down his face. It is weather. The first mistake the aliens made was trusting their suits more than their eyes. Valus ordered a full environmental scan before anyone moved 10 feet from the craft, and the 2 security officers obeyed with the stiff confidence of people who had never been lost in bad country. Their helmets painted the world in clean colors, red for danger, blue for breathable pockets, green for stable ground. Caleb looked past all of it. He watched the mud slide around his boots, the way the rain bounced off certain leaves but soaked into others, the way the black trees leaned one direction even though the wind had shifted twice since landing. We need higher ground, he said. Valus did not look up from his wrist display. The scanner indicates the ridge to the east is chemically unstable. Caleb pointed west, toward a slope covered in thick roots and low silver grass. Then we go that way. That direction is marked as dense biological activity. That means living things know it is safe enough to stand there. One of the guards made a sharp clicking sound. Human instinct is not a navigation system. Caleb wiped rain from his eyes. Neither is a machine that thinks lightning is dirt. The guard stepped east anyway, more annoyed than afraid. His boot sank 6 inches into a patch of smooth gray soil that looked dry on the surface. Caleb saw the ground tremble around the edges and moved fast, grabbing the back of the guard's armor and hauling him away with a grunt. The gray patch folded inward like wet bread, not violent, not dramatic, just hungry in the slow, patient way nature could be hungry. The guard stumbled backward, breathing hard through his filter. Caleb let him go and flexed his hand once. "That is Pete's sink," he said. "Or close enough. You do not test ground like that with your whole body. Use a stick." Velas stared at the collapsing patch, then at the human. "How did you know?" Caleb picked up a fallen branch and snapped off the soft end. "I grew up where floodwater lies to you." They kept moving. The forest did not roar or charge or behave like a monster from an old movie. It simply made everything difficult. The air was thick enough to turn each breath into work. The rain found seams in expensive armor. Spores clung to visors and blurred the view. Something small and unseen kept chirping from different directions, and the security officers kept turning toward it until Caleb told them to stop feeding it attention. After 20 minutes, Mira began to lag behind. At first she hit it well. She adjusted her pack, checked her instruments, nodded whenever Velas looked back. Then her steps shortened. Her breathing turned thin. Caleb heard it before anyone else did. He had heard that sound from hikers in the Rockies, from old men cleaning out homes after hurricanes, from himself once, years ago, when he had tried to pretend heat exhaustion was just being tired. "Mira," he said, softer now. "Sit down." "I am fine." That was not a question. Velas turned sharply. "Assistant Mira will continue." Caleb stepped between them, not aggressive, just there. "Her filter is fighting the humidity. She is not getting enough clean airflow. The unit is archive certified." "Congratulations." "She still cannot breathe." Mira tried to stand straighter, embarrassed, but her knees dipped. Caleb caught her elbow and guided her to a root high enough to sit on. He took off his own field scarf, wrapped it around the intake of her filter, then used his knife to trim a strip from the inner lining of his jacket. Velas looked offended. "You are damaging issued equipment. Send me a bill." Caleb poured a little water over the cloth, packed it into the overheated intake, and adjusted the pressure valve by hand. The fix was ugly, temporary, and completely human. Mira drew one careful breath, then another. Color slowly returned to her face. "Why help me?" she asked. Caleb looked out at the trees, where the rain was beginning to change rhythm. Bigger drops. Slower wind. A storm turning. "Because panic spreads," he said. Then, after a beat, he added, "And because you asked about my family like I was a person." Mira lowered her eyes. Velas said nothing, but the live medical feed above Caleb's wrist showed his stress numbers climbing. Not from fear of the planet. From memory. From old rain, old loss, and the sick knowledge that once again, people were depending on him while someone powerful pretended the problem was under control. Caleb stood, tested the wind with 2 wet fingers, and looked toward the west ridge. "We move in 5 minutes," he said. "Stay close. Step where I step. And if something looks easy, assume it is lying." By the time they reached the west ridge, the rain had softened into a warm mist that clung to everything and made the world feel closer than it was. The descent craft was gone behind the trees, hidden by black trunks and hanging sheets of silver moss. Velas kept looking back, though he pretended he was checking signal strength. The signal was gone. The broadcast drone still floated near them, but it could no longer reach the archive directly. It was recording now, storing every breath, every mistake, every quiet moment the curator could no longer edit. Caleb liked that less than he expected. Being watched had never made bad ground easier. "Stop," he said, raising one hand. The group froze. Even the guards had started listening, though they hated themselves for it. Ahead of them, the ridge opened into a shallow bowl of red mud and pale stone. At the center sat the remains of an old expedition camp. No bodies in the open. No dramatic warning carved into a wall. Just collapsed shelters, cracked oxygen tanks, dead power cells, and 3 landing beacons arranged in a crooked triangle like somebody had tried to make order out of a very bad day. Mira stepped closer, her scanner trembling in her hand. Archive markings, she whispered. Third survey age. That was almost 400 years ago. Velas swallowed. Expedition 17. Caleb crouched near a broken equipment case and brushed mud from the side. The hinges had rusted through, but the label was still readable under the grime. He did not know the alien words, but he knew the shape of failure. Too many tools left behind. Too many packs unopened. People had run from here. Fast. What happened to them? Mira asked. Velas answered before Caleb could. Eden 9 happened. Caleb looked up. That is not an answer. He moved through the camp slowly, careful not to step on anything that might still matter to someone. A crushed food cylinder. A torn weather tarp. A row of sample jars, all sealed, all empty. The story began to arrange itself in his head the way storm damage did after a hurricane. Not all at once. Piece by piece. They set up here, Caleb said. Thought the stone basin would protect them from wind. It did not. The rain pooled. Their heaters pulled moisture into the tents. Filters clogged. Then their beacons started screaming into the storm. One of the guards looked at him. Screaming? Caleb pointed with the stick he had been using since the sinkhole. That beacon. High-energy pulse, right? Mira checked the casing. Plasma relay. Standard emergency burst. There is your first problem. Velas frowned. Emergency beacons save lives. On your worlds, maybe. Caleb tapped the pale stone under his boot. Here, that much energy probably lit them up like a gas station sign at midnight. Mira looked across the camp, then down at her scanner. The readings were unstable near every piece of powered alien equipment, but almost calm near Caleb's compass, knife, and paper notebook. Her face changed. Not fear this time. Understanding. The planet was not attacking them randomly, she said. Caleb nodded once. It was responding. Velas stepped forward too quickly. That is speculation. No, Caleb said. That is pattern. He walked to the far edge of the basin, where a line of old footprints had hardened in mineral clay. Alien boots, deep and frantic, all pointed toward the east, toward the gray sink fields they had nearly entered earlier. Caleb followed the tracks with his eyes, then turned back to the camp. They ran the wrong way because their instruments told them east was clear. Mira whispered, like ours did. Nobody spoke for a while. The mist moved between them. Somewhere in the trees, the chirping sound started again, not closer, just present. Velas looked smaller without a signal to carry his certainty for him. Caleb reached down to pick up a small metal marker half buried under a root. It was not alien. The shape was wrong. The numbers etched into it were old, worn, and simple, 12 feet to service hatch. Caleb stared at it until the mist on his face no longer felt like rain. Mira saw his hand tighten. Caleb. He turned the marker toward them. Curator, he said quietly. Why would a 400-year-old alien expedition camp have directions written in feet? Velas did not answer. For once, the man who had built his life on explaining the universe had nothing ready to say. Caleb did not move for several seconds. He just held the little metal marker in his palm while rain ticked softly against the leaves above them. 12 feet to service hatch. Not meters. Not archive units. Feet. The number sat there like a voice from a locked room, plain and stubborn and impossible to explain away. Velas finally reached for it. Caleb closed his hand before the curator could touch it. No, Caleb said. Velas stiffened. That object may be classified evidence. Then classify your hand somewhere else. One of the guards shifted, but not forward. Not anymore. The forest had taught them just enough humility to keep still. Mira stepped beside Caleb and looked at the slope behind the old camp. If the marker is accurate, the hatch should be there. She pointed toward a wall of roots and moss climbing the side of the ridge. Caleb followed the line with his eyes. At first, it looked like nothing. Just black stone, wet roots, and silver vines hanging in curtains. Then he noticed the wrongness. Nature was messy, but it was not lazy. The roots had grown around a rectangle, not across it. The moss was thicker on the edges. The stone face had a seam too straight to be geological. Caleb felt something tighten behind his ribs. He had spent most of his life fixing old systems left behind by people who assumed someone else would remember how they worked. A farm pump, a county generator, a flooded relay station, a forgotten shelter door under a mountain on a planet the galaxy was afraid to name. Help me clear it, he said. Velas recovered some of his old voice. Absolutely not. We do not know what is behind that structure. Caleb looked at him. That has been true since we landed. Mira set her scanner down and pulled at the vines. After a second, one guard joined her, then the other. Valus did not help, but he also did not stop them. Together they stripped away layers of wet growth until the wall beneath showed dull gray metal, pitted with age but still solid. Caleb wiped mud from the center panel with his sleeve. A cracked plate appeared. The letters were faded, but English survived in the grooves. Terran Civil Habitat Access, Group 12. Below it was a handprint scanner the size of a dinner plate. Old. Simple. Built by people who expected gloves, dirt, and bad weather. Caleb let out a breath that almost became a laugh, and almost became something worse. You recognize this? Mira asked. No, he said. But I recognize the kind of person who built it. Valus stepped closer, voice thin. Humanity did not colonize Eden 9. The archive has no record of such an event. Caleb stared at the door. The archive also called me equipment. He placed his palm on the scanner. Nothing happened at first. The forest seemed to lean in around them. Then the panel warmed under his hand. Deep inside the ridge, something clicked. Not a dramatic roar. Not some grand alien awakening. Just a tired old lock doing its job after waiting too long. A strip of amber light flickered above the hatch. The camera drone drifted closer, its damaged lens focusing. Caleb's wrist sensors spiked for the first time. Heart rate up, breathing tight. Mira saw the numbers and softly said, Caleb? He did not answer. He was listening to the door. Static crackled from a speaker hidden somewhere under the moss. The first words came out broken, stretched by centuries of disuse. Then the system found itself and spoke in plain American English, warm, grainy, and old-fashioned, like a weather radio in a kitchen during a storm. Biometric match confirmed. Terran civilian detected. Welcome home. Mira covered her mouth. One guard took a step back. Valus looked as if the entire foundation of his life had shifted under him. Caleb kept his hand on the panel, eyes fixed on the little amber light. For a moment, he was not on Eden 9. He was 12 years old again, standing on a porch in Louisiana, hearing his father say that every house has a sound when it knows you are back. The hatch opened inward with a long sigh of sealed air. Darkness waited beyond it, dry and still. Caleb picked up his kit, touched the photograph inside his jacket, and stepped through the doorway before Valus could find another lie. The air inside the mountain was dry enough to make Caleb cough. After hours in warm rain, the stillness felt unnatural, like stepping into a house where the power had gone out during a storm and everyone had left in the middle of dinner. His flashlight cut across a narrow corridor lined with old conduit, faded warning labels, and hand-painted arrows that pointed deeper into the rock. The English was sun-bleached and practical. Water, clinic, mess hall, school, maintenance. Not military words. Not invasion words. Home words. Mira came in behind him slowly, her boots whispering over dust that had not been disturbed in centuries. The two guards followed with their weapons lowered. Valus stayed at the threshold for a long moment, as if refusing to enter could keep history from becoming real. Caleb ran his fingers over a row of small marks on the wall, each one carved at a different height. Names sat beside them in blocky handwriting. Abby, age 6. Jonah, age 8. Luis, age 5. Somebody had measured children here. Somebody had laughed here. Somebody had argued about bedtime under a mountain on a planet the galaxy said no one could survive. Caleb swallowed and kept walking. The corridor opened into a common room with long metal tables bolted to the floor. Mugs still sat in a drying rack. A deck of playing cards lay scattered near an old coffee machine. A calendar hung on the wall, its paper curled at the edges. July, 2194. Mira touched the edge of the table with 2 fingers. This was not an outpost, she said softly. Caleb nodded. No, outposts do not have kids. Valus finally entered, his voice too sharp, too fast. A hidden human settlement proves nothing. Unauthorized colonization was common among early frontier groups. The council may have quarantined this site for public safety. Caleb turned toward him. Public safety usually comes with a rescue attempt. Valus did not answer. They found the archive room behind a sealed glass door that opened when Caleb touched the pad beside it. Inside, rows of old drives sat in dust-proof cabinets. Most were dead. A few still showed amber standby lights. patient as porch lamps left on for someone late coming home. The damaged camera drone drifted inside and recorded everything. Caleb selected a terminal with a cracked plastic chair in front of it. When he brushed the keyboard, the screen flickered, blinked twice, and loaded an emergency log. A woman appeared in grainy video, maybe 40, brown hair tied back, face tired but steady. The name below her image made Caleb stop breathing for a second. Rachel Morgan, civil engineer, Terran Exodus Group 12. Mira looked from the screen to Caleb. Morgan. Caleb pulled the photograph from his jacket without meaning to. His hand shook once, then went still. The woman on the screen had his father's eyes. Or maybe he only wanted that to be true. Rachel looked into the old camera and spoke with the calm of someone trying not to frighten people nearby. Day 182. Eden is hard, but she is holding us. Crops in Greenhouse 3 survived the storm. Children are back in class. We lost the outer relay again, but nobody is giving up. Tell Earth, if this reaches anyone, that we made a life here. Caleb sat down slowly. No grand speech came to him. No flag-waving pride. Just a heavy ache behind his ribs, the kind that comes when a family story you never heard turns out to have been waiting for you in the dark. The next file opened by itself. Rachel's face was older, thinner, the room behind her dim. Council ships arrived today. They ordered evacuation and classified the colony as a biological hazard. We asked for proof. They gave us silence. They said history would be cleaner if Eden stayed empty. Myra's voice broke the quiet. They erased them. Velas stepped back from the terminal. Those records are incomplete. Caleb looked at him, and there was no anger on his face. That made it worse. No, he said. They are inconvenient. On the screen, Rachel leaned closer to the camera. If anyone from Earth ever comes home, do not let them rename this place. We lived here. We mattered. Caleb folded the photograph and put it back inside his jacket, careful as a promise. Then he looked at the drone. Keep recording. Velas moved faster than Caleb expected, not toward the door, not toward the guards, but toward the archive terminal. His long silver-violet fingers reached for the emergency drive slot with the clean confidence of a man who had destroyed facts before and called it order. Caleb stood up from the cracked plastic chair. He did not shout. He did not lunge. He simply said, "Do not touch the archive." Velas froze with his hand an inch from the drive. "You are confused by sentiment," he said, though his voice had lost its polish. "These records are unverified, politically dangerous, and possibly contaminated by isolation stress. They cannot be released." Caleb looked at the old screen, at Rachel Morgan's paused face, at the dust on the tables, and the children's height marks in the hallway beyond. That is a fancy way to say buried. Mira stepped between Velas and the cabinet, pale with fear, but standing anyway. "Curator, the broadcast drone has stored enough to require review. We should contact the Archive Ethics Board." Velas gave her a look that made her flinch. "Assistant Mira, your career is not worth a dead colony." Caleb's jaw tightened, just once. "Careful." Velas turned on him. "You do not understand what you found." Eden, 9 became a symbol. A necessary boundary. The Council built peace on the belief that some places were beyond all species. If the galaxy learns humanity lived here, the archive loses authority over every frontier claim, every quarantine, every restricted world. So people disappeared because your map looked cleaner without them. History is always cleaner after distance. Caleb took one step closer, slow enough that no one could call it a threat. "My family had a word for that." Velas lifted his chin. "And what was it?" "Lying." The security officers looked at each other. Their weapons remained low, but Velas saw hesitation and panicked under it. He slapped his palm against his command cuff. "Field authority override. Seal this habitat. Disable unauthorized human access. Purge local records pending quarantine review." For one long second, nothing happened. Then the lights in the archive room shifted from amber to deep red. A low tone rolled through the walls, old machinery waking under stone. The terminal went black. Velas exhaled like he had won. Caleb did not move. The screen came back on in plain white text. Unauthorized foreign command rejected. Terran civilian present. Sanctuary protocol active. Somewhere far below, heavy locks turned. Not one door. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. The bunker did not feel like a ruin anymore. It felt like a house standing up in the dark. Mira whispered, "What is sanctuary protocol?" Caleb stared at the screen. I do not know. Then the speakers crackled, and the same old American voice from the hatch filled the room, warmer now, clearer, almost gentle. Emergency archive protection engaged. Civilian records secured. Non-Terran weapons placed in safe mode. External signal routing restored. The guards looked down at their equipment as the power indicators faded to harmless blue. Valus touched his cuff again and again, each time with less dignity. Impossible. This facility has no authority over archive systems. The terminal answered him before Caleb could. Archive designation not recognized. This is a Terran civil habitat. A tremor passed through the floor, steady and controlled. On the cracked monitor, a map of Eden 9 opened. Lights appeared beneath the mountains, under the valleys, along the rivers. One by one, buried systems came online across the planet, not like weapons eager to punish, but like porch lights switching on after a family car turned into the driveway. The damaged camera drone lifted higher, its lens suddenly clear as the bunker fed it power. A green signal icon blinked. Live transmission restored. Caleb looked at Valus, and the curator finally understood that the galaxy was watching again. Every word, every lie, every dusty photograph, every child's name carved into the wall. Caleb reached past him, selected Rachel Morgan's final log, and sent it to the open channel. You wanted a demonstration, he said quietly. Here it is. For a while, the only sound in the archive room was Rachel Morgan's voice crossing 4 centuries of dust. She did not beg. She did not curse the council. She simply named people. Thomas Reed, greenhouse lead, loved black coffee and terrible baseball. Amina Patel, schoolteacher, kept 23 children reading during storm season. Joseph Morgan, water systems, could fix a pump with wire, tape, and language not fit for children. One by one, the colony stopped being a secret and became human again. Across the restored broadcast, the galaxy watched old photographs appear beside the names. Families standing under rain shelters, kids holding muddy vegetables, tired workers smiling beside a repaired generator, a little church made from cargo panels, a hand-painted sign over the cafeteria that said coffee first, panic later. Caleb stood in front of the terminal with his hands at his sides, and every number on his wrist monitor finally betrayed him. His heart was racing. His breathing was uneven. Not because Eden 9 scared him, because it hurts to meet your dead by surprise. Valus said nothing. There was nothing left for him to polish. Every time he opened his mouth, the silence of the room pushed the words back in. Mira stepped close to Caleb, not touching him, just near enough to remind him he was not alone in that mountain. I am sorry, she said. Caleb kept looking at the screen. You did not do this. My people believed it. He nodded slowly. Believing a lie is easy when it makes you feel safe. The terminal finished the final log. Rachel's face paused on the screen, tired, brave, and terribly ordinary. Then the system opened the external channel fully. Voices from the archive chamber flooded through in fragments, shocked delegates, emergency clerks, translators speaking over one another, entire governments realizing that the most feared world in their maps had once had school lunches and repair schedules. Valus finally whispered, "What will Earth do?" Caleb turned to him. There was no smile on his face, no victory pose, no hunger to humiliate him. Earth will remember, he said. That is usually enough to change things. The bunker doors opened on their own before dawn. Caleb walked back outside with Mira and the 2 silent guards behind him. Valus followed last, smaller somehow, carrying the weight of a truth he could no longer bury. The storm had passed. Eden 9 was still hard and wet and dangerous, but the first sunlight made the black trees shine green at the edges. In the valley below, old habitat domes rose from the mist, their windows dark, their frames still standing after all those years. They did not look like ruins to Caleb. They looked like houses waiting for someone to turn the lights back on. Mira looked at them and asked, "What should the galaxy call this place now?" Caleb took the photograph from his jacket and held it beside the old colony on the horizon. 2 homes separated by centuries, but somehow speaking the same language. Call it what you want, he said. Names are easy. He slipped the photograph away and started down the ridge. Just do not forget people lived here. The camera drone stayed on him as he walked through the wet grass toward the valley, a tired man on a difficult world, carrying no flag, making no threat, claiming nothing that had not already been paid for by ordinary lives. And that was what unsettled the galaxy most. Humanity had not conquered the forbidden place. Humanity had cooked breakfast there, raised children there, fixed broken pipes there, and waited, quietly, for the day someone would come home and tell the truth. From that morning forward, every map in civilized space changed. But the wiser species changed something deeper than maps. They changed the way they spoke about humans. Not as fragile, not as primitive, not as temporary guests at the edge of history. Because a species that can make a home in a place everyone else fears is not weak. It is patient. And when patient people finally open the door, the universe learns that memory can be stronger than any weapon.